I am Rachel Gannett, a 31 years old woman. I'm the founder of a nonprofit for displaced mothers in Sacramento, California. What happened with my sister shattered more than my faith in family. It nearly destroyed everything I built. The last day I trusted my sister, she sat across from me at our mother's old kitchen table, the late March sun stripping her face through broken blinds. She held a mug of peppermint tea like it was the only warm thing she had left in the world, her hands trembling as she said the words that cracked me open like a fault line. "I'm pregnant." I froze. She didn't smile, didn't look away, just let it hang there, the words and the silence that followed. I looked at her, at the layers of scarves wrapped around her shoulders, at the bruised half-moons under her eyes, and for one moment I saw the little girl I once braided hair for on rainy Saturdays. Not the woman who'd vanished from our lives for months at a time. Not the sister who missed our dad's funeral without explanation. Just Diana, raw and scared and mine. "How far along?" I asked. 10 weeks, she said softly, her voice cracking like old wood. "I know I haven't earned your trust, Rachel, I know that, but I want this baby to change me." I looked down at my hands. My nails were bitten short, cuticles raw from stress. I was already stretched thin running Willow House, the nonprofit I'd built after my own miscarriage and divorce. But I nodded. I wanted it to be true. God, I needed it to be true. We sat there for another hour, sipping tea and talking about her plans, prenatal vitamins, housing, a possible job. She asked if she could help me at the nonprofit. "Even just answering phones or folding donated clothes," she said. "I just want to be around women who know what they're doing, who know how to stay." That word struck me. Stay. Diana never stayed anywhere, never rooted, always fleeing. But this time maybe, she'd found a reason to anchor. I told her she could come by the following Monday. She smiled, the kind of smile that made you forget all the times she let you down. When she showed up that Monday, she was 20 minutes early, held a box of donuts from that expensive place downtown, and greeted every staff member with a warmth I barely recognized. "She's glowing," one of our counselors whispered to me later. "Pregnancy suits her." I said nothing, because I wanted to believe it too. Over the next 2 weeks, Diana became a fixture. She watched intake interviews, helped sort toiletries, shadowed Monica, our finance director, while she organized client reimbursement reports. She even took initiative, organized the storeroom, created a spreadsheet for in-kind donations, suggested we add QR codes to our flyers. It felt too good to be true. But I was so tired of being suspicious. And when she placed my hand on her belly one afternoon and said, "You'll be the best aunt," I cried. By mid-April, she was staying late, sometimes even crashing in the spare office overnight. She said her apartment wasn't great, noisy neighbors, no heat. She wanted to be near the women, near the work. I rationalized it, told myself it's temporary, she's trying. Then something unbelievable happened. We received a donation. An anonymous one, $310,000. I thought it was a typo at first. The letter came in a simple white envelope with no return address. Inside, a typed note on thick ivory paper. "I lost my daughter 2 years ago. Please use this for women like her, women who deserve a new beginning. Consider this the seed for something sacred." There were no strings attached except one. The money had to be used to open a second Willow House in Yolo County, about an hour away, an area with almost no maternal shelters. It felt like fate. I cried in my office, called Monica, we danced in the hallway. We were going to expand. Diana offered to help lead the expansion, said she had time, that being pregnant gave her insight into what women needed. "I want this to be my legacy too," she said. She created mock-ups, typed budgets, set up a workspace in the empty admin suite. Monica was impressed, I was relieved. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the mission alone. 2 weeks later, I saw the first red flag. A vendor invoice I didn't recognize. It was for $8,400, marked as a deposit for site prep. It didn't match our expansion plan. I asked Diana. She said, "It's for landscaping, the space we're scouting has some overgrowth. I thought it'd be smart to reserve early." She sounded confident, calm. I let it go. Then another invoice came in, this one for branding consultation, $12,000, again rooted through Diana. I asked Monica if she'd approved it. She hadn't seen it. I confronted Diana in the break room. She stood there, clutching her belly, eyes wide and glassy. Are you really accusing a pregnant woman of stealing? The word struck like a slap. I backed off. And that hesitation, that 1 second of doubt, cost me everything. Within a week, Monica discovered multiple bank transfers Diana had initiated, using a forged signature, mine, transfers to vendors who didn't exist, accounts that had her fingerprints all over them. When I tried to call her, she didn't pick up. When I went to her apartment, it was cleared out, not a single trace she'd ever lived there. Gone. So was the money. All of it. Monica and I sat in the main office, silent as the gravity of what happened sank in. The $310,000 we'd been entrusted with stolen. The second house dead, our donors furious, the board stunned, the reputation of our shelter, our name, my life's work in freefall. But the worst wasn't the scandal. It was realizing I never once saw the truth. Not in her eyes. Not in her lies. And not even when I placed my hand on the belly that was never carrying life. Just betrayal. Just a shell. Just the performance of a sister who knew exactly where to cut deepest. The last thing I remember clearly before everything collapsed was sitting in the staff garden behind Willow House, clutching my phone in both hands like a lifeline. I kept refreshing my messages, praying for a response that never came. Diana's phone was off. Her email bounced. Her social media wiped clean. It was as if she'd ghosted the entire planet. I didn't even cry at first. I just sat there numb, my mind replaying every moment over the last 2 months like a film reel from someone else's life. Her laugh in the office hallway, her hand on her belly. The night she helped a mother named Janice fold donated baby clothes and whispered, "You're stronger than you think." All of it lies. The next morning, the board called an emergency meeting. I stood in front of them like a defendant, every bone in my body aching with shame. Monica presented the financial discrepancies, walking them through every transaction Diana had orchestrated under my nose. I watched their faces harden. One by one, the trust I had earned over 5 years of blood and grit evaporated. I let her in, I told them, that's on me. They didn't nod, they didn't reassure, they just sat there quiet and still. I understood. If I had been in their place, I might not have trusted me either. After the meeting, Monica closed the office door and sat across from me, her voice low and steady. You didn't fail us, Rachel, she failed you. I wanted to believe her, but when I looked at the whiteboard calendar with YOLO House groundbreaking still written in blue marker, my stomach turned. The media found out within the week. At first, it was a quiet ripple, a local blog picking up the board minutes, a whisper of possible financial misconduct. But within days, it became a headline. Charity scandal, founder's sister vanishes after $310,000 disappears. My name was in every article. Not Diana. Mine. The face of the woman who'd built Willow House from grief, now the symbol of betrayal. People I hadn't spoken to in years messaged me, some out of curiosity, some out of judgment, and a few with veiled satisfaction. One old college acquaintance commented on a post, "Karma always circles back." I closed my laptop and didn't open it for 3 days. Instead, I wandered my apartment like a ghost. I stopped eating. I stopped responding to calls. I kept replaying it, her hands on her belly, the way she said, "Careful, auntie," like she meant it. How do you mourn someone who isn't dead? How do you grieve when the person who broke you is still out there, walking free, wearing your trust like a disguise? One night I went for a drive. It was past midnight. I didn't know where I was going. I just kept driving, winding through empty streets, headlights slicing through fog. When I reached the freeway overpass, I pulled over without thinking. There, under the bridge, was a figure huddled in the shadows. I didn't realize it was her until I saw the boots. Brown leather, worn at the soles. She always used to brag that they were the only good thing she bought during her spiritual year in Taos. My hands clenched the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. She was thinner, hair tangled, her hoodie pulled low over her face. She looked like a shell of herself, all her edges dulled as if the world had scraped her clean of identity. And then she looked up. Her eyes locked. I didn't get out of the car. I didn't scream, I didn't sob, I didn't even move. I just sat there frozen as my sister turned her head away and disappeared behind the concrete. I drove home shaking, not out of fear, out of rage, out of betrayal, out of the sick, twisted recognition that I still wanted her to be okay. That night, I sat at my dining table, opened my laptop, and began typing. Where it went wrong, a letter from Rachel Alcott. I told the truth. Every piece of it. The fake pregnancy, the forged invoices, the way I let her inside because I believed in blood more than policy, the way it nearly cost us everything. I sent it to every donor, every partner, every staff member. I expected backlash. What I got was something else. Support. Real support. Not blind forgiveness, not sympathy. But understanding. Emails poured in. I appreciate your honesty. You're doing the right thing. This is why we believed in Willow House in the first place. One donor who had quietly withdrawn after the scandal replied with a single sentence. Let me know where to send the next check. I sat back, tears rolling silently down my cheeks, and whispered to the room. She didn't break me. The next day, the board voted unanimously to keep me on, under one condition. All financial operations would be overseen by a third-party auditor for 2 years. I agreed immediately. I didn't want control. I wanted redemption. Not for Diana. For Willow House. For the women who came to us with nothing but bruises and bobbies. Karina was one of them. She arrived 2 weeks after the news broke, 22 years old with a 6-month-old daughter, 2 duffel bags, and eyes that had already seen too much. When I met her, she held her baby like she was clinging to the last safe thing in the world. I offered her tea. She asked, "Do I have to tell you everything now?" I shook my head. "No, you only have to breathe." She exhaled and said, "Okay, then I'm staying." That night, I walked the halls after everyone had gone to bed. I passed the nursery, the kitchen, the mural of the willow tree, now peeling from water damage but still standing. I paused in front of it and whispered, "We're still here." And I knew somewhere, in some dark corner of whatever life Diana had slithered into, that truth would find her. Because the lie didn't win. Love did. And soon, I'd make sure the whole world knew it. When I first saw Karina cry, it wasn't during her intake or the first night she spent at Willow House. It was 2 weeks later in the laundry room of all places. The dryer had eaten one of her baby's socks. Just a tiny pink thing, probably cheap, probably easily replaced. But she stared at the machine like it had ripped her heart out. "I only had 3 pairs," she whispered. I walked in just in time to hear that, and without thinking, I crouched beside her and opened my arms. She didn't hesitate. She collapsed into me, baby carrier still strapped to her chest, sobbing against my shoulder in gasping waves. That was the moment something shifted in me. A tether was tied not just to Karina but to a deeper truth I hadn't faced. I couldn't let Diana be the last thing I stood for. Over the following months, Karina became more than just a resident. She was the heartbeat of the house. She helped other women navigate their paperwork. She learned how to organize the donation bins better than I ever had. She even started drawing again, little pencil sketches of her daughter asleep, curled like a comma in the center of the page. One night, over cheap pizza and reusable wine glasses, she looked at me and said, "You should let us talk, on camera." I blinked. Talk to who? The world. I laughed, confused. "Karina, no one's looking for us on YouTube." She leaned forward. "Not yet, but they should. We're still here, you're still here. Don't you think people need to know what surviving looks like?" That's how the Voices from the Inside video series was born. At first, it was just a phone mounted to a bookshelf. Natural light, no script. I interviewed her gently, letting her lead. She told the story of her pregnancy, her parents' threats, the nights she sat in a cold van holding her baby to her chest because the heater was broken and she didn't want her to shiver alone. She said my name near the end. She didn't know me, but Rachel gave me a room before she asked me any questions. That line stopped me cold. I hadn't even remembered doing that. When we posted the video, I thought it might get a few views. Maybe some volunteers would see it. Maybe it would help with fundraising. By the end of the week, it had 500,000 views. People from all over the country messaged us. Social workers, survivors, donors who thought they'd never trust again. Our inbox flooded. We got requests from college campuses asking to screen the video for Domestic Abuse Awareness Week. A retired judge in Oregon sent a $20,000 check with a handwritten note, "For the women brave enough to speak." But with the attention came something darker. An anonymous email hit my inbox at 3:08 a.m. one Sunday. "She's in Stockton, shelter on Ellis." No greeting, no sign-off, just those 8 words. There was an image attached. My stomach turned before I even clicked it. Deanna. Skinny, eyes hollow, sitting in a line outside a mobile pantry. She had a styrofoam cup of coffee in one hand and what looked like a bruised banana in the other. She looked unrecognizable, except for the boots. Those boots again. I didn't know what to do, didn't know if I should feel fear or pity or vindication. So I did the only thing I could think of. I called our legal consultant. Within hours, he had the DA's office on the line. "If she's in the area," he said, "we can reopen the case." But it's been almost a year. "We have everything we need. Your records, the financial trail, your statement, we just need her in custody." I hung up and stared at the wall. This wasn't theoretical anymore. This was real. The next few days passed in a blur. My team kept operating as usual, but I was a ghost, waiting for news, checking my phone like a ritual. Then the call came. They'd found her. A patrol unit had run her name during a welfare check. She gave a fake ID. They matched her fingerprints. She was in custody. The charges came faster than I expected. Fraudulent misrepresentation, identity theft, wire fraud, misuse of charitable funds, criminal impersonation. Because she'd used my name, forged my signature, destroyed everything I built. I thought I'd feel relief, but all I felt was cold. They asked if I would testify. I said yes. Of course I said yes. But that night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I had just signed up to break my own heart all over again. The pretrial hearing was surreal. I walked into the courtroom with Monica at my side. Karina came too, wearing a dress she bought for $9 at a thrift store, standing tall like armor. And then they brought Diana in. Handcuffed, pale hair tied back. She looked around the room once and froze when her eyes landed on me. We stared at each other for a long, silent beat. Then she looked away. The judge read the charges. Her public defender entered a plea, not guilty. It was like déjà vu, a twist of the knife that hadn't quite finished cutting. Later in the hallway, I asked the DA's assistant, why not guilty? She shrugged, default tactic, she may negotiate a plea, but we go to trial unless she folds. I wanted her to fold. Not because I wanted to see her punished, but because I didn't know if I had the strength to sit in that witness chair and tell a room full of strangers just how thoroughly my own sister had gutted me. That night, I started drafting my victim impact statement. And this time, I didn't hold back. Not to get revenge, but to speak a truth I'd been swallowing for too long. She didn't just steal money, she stole hope, and she used my name to do it. I didn't tell anyone how many times I rehearsed the testimony in my head. In the shower, while cooking, sitting in traffic, I whispered my statement like a prayer and rewrote it in my dreams. But no matter how many versions I crafted, I always came back to one unshakable truth. I had loved her. I had trusted her. And still, I was about to help send her to prison. The trial date arrived with a cold drizzle. Sacramento felt like it was holding its breath. Monica picked me up in silence, both of us dressed in black like we were headed to a funeral. In a way, we were. Karina sat in the back seat. She didn't speak much either, but her presence, her steady, unflinching support, grounded me in a way I didn't expect. She clutched my hand before we walked in. "Whatever happens," she whispered, "you already won, you're here." The courtroom was full. Not just legal staff or reporters, but survivors. Women I had helped, Residents, old and new, they sat like quiet witnesses to a storm they had all weathered in one form or another. And then Diana was brought in. She wore the same orange jumpsuit from the hearing, the same blank expression, but there was something different this time, a slump in her shoulders, a quiet resignation. She didn't scan the room, didn't look for me. When they called me to the stand, my hands shook so badly I had to grip the rail on the way up. I took the oath, sat down, and then I told the truth. I believed her, I began, because she was my sister, because she looked me in the eye and told me she was carrying life, because I wanted to believe that blood could change someone. The words poured from me like water from a cracked dam. I spoke of the kitchen conversation, the peppermint tea, the donuts from that overpriced bakery, the belly she let me touch, the one that carried nothing but a prosthetic and a lie. I talked about Willow House, how we lived donation to donation, how that $310,000 was a miracle, and how she turned it into a weapon. She forged my name. She pretended to be someone she never was. She didn't just steal money, she stole safety from women who needed it more than she ever had. At one point, I saw Karina crying. At another, I saw Monica biting her cheek, fists clenched. And finally, when I finished, I looked directly at Diana and said, I am not here because I hate you. I'm here because you made me a liar by extension. And I'm reclaiming the truth not just for me, but for every woman you stepped on to climb higher. The courtroom was silent. The jury watched with heavy eyes. And Diana, she blinked. Once. The trial itself lasted only 4 days. The evidence was overwhelming: bank records, forged documents, video surveillance of her making withdrawals. Her defense attorney argued addiction, desperation, a desire for rebirth. But the jury saw what I had been forced to live. On the 5th day, the verdict came in. Guilty on all counts. Diana didn't flinch, didn't cry, just lowered her eyes and whispered something I'll never forget. Tell Mom I tried. That broke me. Because even now, even after everything, she was still speaking like someone who hadn't fully accepted what she had done, as if her intent outweighed her actions, as if trying made it less ruinous. But this wasn't childhood anymore. There were no do-overs, no invisible parents to mediate, no bedroom walls to scream behind. This was real. This was justice. The sentencing was set for 6 weeks later. I tried not to obsess about the number. Was 6 years enough? Was 12 too much? Would it matter? I focused instead on the Ember Project, on the women, on rebuilding the structure Diana had cracked at its core. Karina started leading weekly groups called Second Chances, a place for residents to process betrayal. Some talked about partners, others about mothers. One spoke quietly about a pastor. All of them looked to me when I walked in, not for answers, but for proof. You can survive someone who tried to destroy you and still choose softness. When sentencing day came, the sky was bright. Cruelly beautiful. I dressed in navy, not for mourning, for strength. I wore the necklace my mother had left me in her will, a simple gold chain Diana had once tried to borrow and accidentally lost. I had found it years later in a shoebox under her bed. It felt right to wear it now. The courtroom wasn't packed this time. Just the necessary few. Diana was brought in. She looked thinner, eyes bruised with sleep loss, hands trembling slightly at her sides. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at anyone. The judge addressed the room. Spoke of the depth of the fraud, the abuse of trust, the profound moral failure, and then he said the words I hadn't known I was waiting for. I sentence you to 9 years in state prison with eligibility for parole in 6. And just like that, it was done. She was led away. No outburst. No apology. No drama. Just footsteps and chains and a door closing behind her. Monica hugged me in the hallway. Karina squeezed my hand. Lysette cried openly. I just stood there staring at the exit sign, breathing in a quiet I hadn't known in months. Later that evening, I walked to the mural behind the Ember Project. It had changed, no longer a peeling willow tree. Now it was a phoenix, wings stretched wide, rising from the outline of a mother holding a child. One of our residents had painted it. without asking, without telling me. It was perfect. I sat beneath it on the warm pavement, barefoot, feeling the paint fumes lingering in the summer air. And for the first time in over a year, I didn't feel haunted. I felt free. Not because she was gone, but because I was still here. And the women around me, they were still rising, still burning bright. From ashes to ember. After the sentencing, everything felt quieter. Not peaceful exactly, but quieter, like the kind of silence that follows a storm, the windows still streaked with rain, the trees still bent, but the wind finally still. Diana was behind bars. The headlines slowed, the donors returned, and life at the Ember Project slipped back into rhythm. Or maybe not rhythm, maybe something new. Something steadier. I found myself moving differently, less reactive, more intentional. I stopped flinching at the sight of unknown numbers on my phone. I stopped checking for messages from burner emails. I even stopped looking over my shoulder when I walked into the office kitchen, expecting unconsciously to find her sipping tea with her fake belly talking to a resident. It had taken months, but I was finally walking through my own life again, not just surviving it. Then Maya emailed me. The documentarian. I hadn't heard from her in over 6 months, not since she first reached out asking to profile our story. Her message was short. We'd like to move forward with the documentary. Are you ready to tell the story from the beginning? I stared at the screen for a long time. Because part of me wanted to say no. To protect it. To lock it all away, the betrayal, the hurt, the rebirth, in a box that no one could edit or reframe. But the other part of me, the part that had sat across from women who'd survived worse, knew better. If we didn't tell it, someone else would. And I wanted the women of the Ember Project, not Diana, to own this story. I called Maya. We met in person a week later. She was calm, professional, and sharp-eyed, someone who understood nuance. She made it clear, no reenactments, no dramatized exploitation, just verite-style storytelling, just truth. She asked for a 6-week shoot schedule. And this time I said yes. The first day of filming was Karina's idea. She wanted it to begin at 5 a.m. in the kitchen, where the women made bottles and brewed bad coffee and half-laughed about how none of them slept anymore. That's the real story, she said. That's where survival lives. I let Maya and her team in just before sunrise. No makeup, no script, I didn't even brush my hair. They followed us through morning routines, staff huddles, grocery runs, donation intakes. They filmed the quiet moments, the ones without speeches or resolutions. And gradually, the story started to reshape. It stopped being about Diana. It became about us. About what we'd built despite her. Maya asked for on-camera interviews, but only if the women wanted to. Lysette agreed first. Then Karina. Then 4 more. One of them, Tara, only 19, a survivor of a trafficking ring, looked into the camera and said, "I thought love was what broke me, but it turns out love is what got me out. This place is love." That quote ended up in the trailer. So did a scene where I sat at the back garden, holding the stone Lysette gave me the day of the sentencing, the one that says truth etched in chipped gray. I told the camera, when my sister lied, I thought the damage was permanent. But this place, this work, proved that healing isn't about erasing what hurt you, it's about building something holy in its place. When the crew wrapped 6 weeks later, Maya hugged me. "You didn't just survive," she whispered, "you transformed." I smiled, exhausted. "No," I said, "we did." The documentary dropped 6 months later on a major streaming platform. Title: Ashes to Ember, Rebuilding After Betrayal. The trailer went live on a Thursday afternoon. By that evening, the clip of Karina saying, "She gave me a room before she asked me any questions," had gone viral again. But this time, it wasn't followed by questions about Diana. It was followed by offers. Support. Partnerships. One message came from the Jessler Foundation, an international grant organization I had once only dreamed of reaching. They had watched the documentary. Their entire board had. And they wanted to fund 5 new Ember Project sites in Toronto, Detroit, Cape Town, Melbourne, and Sao Paulo. I stared at the email, hands trembling. Then I burst into tears. Because this wasn't just rebuilding. This was spreading. We had taken the story of ruin and turned it into a blueprint for something global. The next time I spoke on a stage, it wasn't in a courtroom. It was in Geneva, the Global Women's Recovery Summit. Karina was with me, hair curled, wearing barred heels, holding a speech she wrote by hand and tucked into her bra. When I stepped up to the podium, I didn't start with numbers. I started with a memory. A year ago, my sister walked into my nonprofit pregnant. She walked out with over $300,000 and left me with a broken organization. But today, I stand before you as the founder of something far stronger. Because from that fire, we didn't crumble, we rose. I ended with a photo of the new mural, the Phoenix, painted in the back of the Ember Project's original garden. And the audience stood. Every single one. Not for me. For every woman who had ever survived betrayal and dared to build anyway. When I got back from Geneva, everything felt surreal. The airport crowds, the jet lag, the weight of applause still echoing in my chest. And yet life went on. Karina's daughter had learned to say Rachel or something close to it. It came out more like Rachel, but she shouted it proudly when I walked through the front door of the Ember Project's original house. I scooped her up, held her close, and let the warmth of something real anchor me back home. The emails hadn't stopped. The documentary had sparked something bigger than any of us expected. A senator's aide had reached out requesting a meeting to discuss maternal shelter policy. A trauma therapist in Sweden offered to host a peer exchange. A social media campaign called Ember Natasha's had gained 1.4 million views in a week. But amid the chaos, something else happened. Something quieter. I got a letter. No return address, just my name handwritten in loopy, uneven script. Inside was a folded piece of lined paper, the kind from spiral notebooks, the edges still frayed. It read, "Rachel, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I wouldn't even know what to do with it if you gave it. I just wanted to say you were always the one who stayed, and I was always the one who ran. I'm sorry for how much that cost you." I stared at it for a long time. No postmark, no clue which prison it came from. I couldn't be sure it was even her handwriting. But it was. I knew it in my bones. I sat in silence for a full hour after reading it, not because it shook me, not because it hurt. Because it didn't. I felt nothing. And that nothing, that was freedom. We opened the Ember Center, Toronto 6 weeks later. It was smaller than Sacramento, just 12 beds, a communal kitchen, a garden courtyard framed by concrete walls and climbing ivy. But it pulsed with hope. I flew out for the ribbon cutting wearing a dark green coat and boots I'd splurged on for the occasion. Monica came with me, so did Karina. There was snow on the ground, our breath made clouds in the air. The mural out back had just been finished, a phoenix again, but this one had maple leaves woven into its wings. That made me laugh. "This is getting out of hand," I joked. Karina nudged me, "Nah, phoenixes don't come with a cap." We cut the ribbon with gold scissors, the crowd clapped. A child shouted, "Mom, is that the lady from the movie?" I smiled at her and said, "I'm just the lady who unlocked the door." And I meant it. One night, a few months later, I couldn't sleep. Not because of stress. Not because of grief. Just restlessness. I made tea, sat at my kitchen table, opened my laptop. I found the old photo of Diana and me at our college graduation. She was wearing that red dress she'd found for $19 at a thrift shop. I was in Navy again, clutching my diploma like it was my ticket to another life. We looked happy. Young. Untouched. I didn't cry. I just closed the tab. I poured a second cup of tea. Then I wrote a letter. To her. But not to send. "Dear Diana, I'm not angry anymore. I think that's what I needed you to know. You broke me, yes, but you also forced me to rebuild. And what I've built, it's bigger than us, braver than our family history, stronger than your lies. I'm not glad for what you did, but I'm not ruined by it either. And maybe in your own way, you lit the match that forced me to rise. I hope someday you do too. Rachel." The next morning, I deleted the draft. I didn't need to keep it. I didn't need to send it. I had already let go. Because what Diana took from me was real, but what we built afterward. That was legend. Spring came early to Sacramento the following year. The garden behind the Ember Project bloomed in full color, not just the usual wildflowers and lavender Monica always insisted on planting near the benches, but new growth too. Someone had brought seeds from a women's co-op in Colombia. The petals were fuchsia and blue, their leaves heavy with promise. We were expanding again. 3 more centers were under construction: Detroit, Cape Town, Manila, each one modeled after the same blueprint we had bled into, refined, and rebirthed. We called it the Flame Framework. Karina coined the name. I told her it sounded like a Marvel Universe initiative. She said it is a superhero program just for women. And I believed her. By now, the Ember Project had become more than a shelter. It was a movement. Survivors turned leaders were training new staff. Our trauma-informed toolkit had been downloaded in 7 languages. Our community garden initiative was being replicated by 2 other nonprofits. Our residents didn't just transition out, they transitioned up. One day, Karina brought in a stack of letters. Fan mail, she smirked. From who? Mostly teenage girls. They watched the doc. They're in high school clubs now trying to raise money for their own mini embers. I laughed and pressed my palm to my chest. They call you Mother Phoenix online, she added. That stopped me. That's awful. It's adorable. I rolled my eyes, but the truth. I secretly loved it. That week, a news outlet called asking for a follow-up interview. National big. They wanted to do a Where Are They Now piece, not about Diana, about me, about us. I hesitated. At first I wanted to decline. What was left to say? But Karina sat across from me, arms crossed, a raised brow. You spent your whole life protecting other people's stories, she said. Maybe it's time you told yours. So I agreed. They filmed the piece in the original garden. The one with the Phoenix mural, the same mural where I once sat barefoot after the trial, finally free. This time I wore sandals and linen pants and no makeup. I didn't need armor anymore. The journalist, a warm woman named Talia, asked gentle questions. What did it feel like to start again? What would you tell that version of yourself, the one sitting in the courtroom, watching her sister be sentenced? And finally, what's the hardest part to talk about now? I paused, looked up at the mural, took a breath. That I still miss her sometimes, I said. Not the one who lied, not the one who ran, but the sister I had in childhood, the one who built pillow forts with me and stole my CDs and once punched a boy in the face for calling me names. I miss her because part of me still believes that version existed, and grieving her is like losing someone who never fully died. Talia sat quietly for a moment. Then she said, that's the most honest answer I've ever heard. I smiled. Not politely. Genuinely. Because I had nothing to prove anymore. That night, I walked the halls of the original Ember house. The lights were soft. Someone was playing soft jazz through a Bluetooth speaker. A new mother was rocking her baby in the corner of the living room, whispering lullabies in a language I didn't recognize. I watched from the doorway for a long time. And then I stepped outside. The sky was pink and lavender, the last of the sunset slipping behind the trees. I sat on the back steps, barefoot again. And I let the silence settle. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to fight for my place in the world. It was mine. We had built it. Brick by brick. Story by story. Ash by ember. 6 months after the follow-up interview aired, we received a package at the Ember Project. No return address. Wrapped in brown paper, taped carefully, the way someone might wrap a gift when they didn't have wrapping paper but wanted it to feel important. Inside was a book. The Myth of Sisyphus by Albert Camus. And tucked inside the front cover, folded into a square, was a note written on yellow lined paper. No signature. Just one line. You stopped pushing the boulder, you built a mountain instead. Karina handed it to me, eyebrows raised. Diana. I nodded slowly, my chest tightened. There was no handwriting comparison necessary. I knew her loops, her downward Ys, the way she never dotted her I's, just let them float like unfinished thoughts. I said nothing. Didn't cry. Didn't tear it up. Just tucked it quietly into my drawer, not because I needed to keep it, but because there was nothing left to run from. The damage had been done. The sentence served. The story told. And still we were here. By that fall, our fifth Ember location had opened in Cape Town. A beautiful beach-adjacent 3-story home that once served as a school. We restored it with community input. Residents helped paint the walls. One of them, a woman named Kosi, designed the new mural, a phoenix stitched from broken feathers, her wings open, her chest scarred but beating. We cried when we saw it. Not because it was beautiful, but because it was true. The Ember Project's annual gala came next. The first one we'd held since the scandal. It was elegant, stripped down, nothing performative, just meaning woven into every corner, fairy lights, candles lit by residents in honor of women they'd lost, a table of framed photos of Bobbies now grown. Some had moved out, some were in college, one had joined the military. And on stage, Karina, hair swept back, wearing a deep blue velvet dress someone had donated the year before. She opened with a joke, "I'm not crying, so you're not allowed to either." Everyone laughed. Then she told her story. The same one she'd told before, but this time, not as a survivor. As a leader. She ended with this. "I came to this place with nothing. I thought I'd be invisible forever, but someone opened a door and didn't ask me to prove I deserved to walk through it. That door changed my life, and now it's my honor to hold it open for the next woman." The room erupted in applause. When I stepped on stage to thank her, I didn't have a speech prepared. So I looked at the crowd, the donors, the women, the staff, the strangers who had become family, and I just told the truth. I've spent years building walls, not the kind to keep people out, the kind you build when the floor collapses and you need something to hold the roof up. But tonight, for the first time, I realize we're not in survival anymore. We're in something beyond it. We're not just rebuilding from what was destroyed, we're building what never existed before, and it's because of you. Karina raised her glass. Everyone followed. We toasted to legacy. To truth. To flame. Later that night, after the lights dimmed and the final tablecloths were folded, I stood alone on the ballroom stage. The seats were empty. The microphone cold. But I didn't feel alone. I felt filled. Not with pride, but with presence. I looked out at the empty chairs and whispered to the room. "You almost broke me." The words weren't directed at Diana anymore. They were directed at the past. At the voice inside me that once said I was foolish for trusting, stupid for hopping, weak for loving too deeply. "I'm still here," I said. "And you don't get to define me." Then I stepped down from the stage and walked out into the night. The air smelled like jasmine. A warm breeze kissed my neck. And somewhere in the distance, I swear I heard laughter, light, soft, familiar. But maybe that was just memory giving me grace. Either way, I smiled. Because grief doesn't always leave. Sometimes it simply learns to sit beside you in silence. And even silence can be holy. There's a particular silence that only comes in the early morning, before alarms, before Bobbies cry, before the city starts to hum. I sat in that silence, curled in a chair on the back patio of the original Ember house, coffee warm in my hands, wrapped in the shawl my mother used to wear. The same shawl Diana once wrapped around her shoulders when she lied to me. I hadn't touched it in years. But that morning I wore it not out of nostalgia, but out of reclamation. This was mine now. Not hers. Not the memories. Mine. The world had grown since the fire. 10 Ember centers. Hundreds of women transitioned. Thousands of children stabilized. Millions of people reached through videos, books, talks, forums, partnerships. But none mattered as much to me as the quiet moment I shared that morning with Karina. She joined me on the patio, barefoot, in pajamas, a piece of toast in one hand and her daughter asleep in the other arm. She leaned her head on my shoulder and sighed. "She starts kindergarten soon." I smiled already. She's reading, she said. Little books, her favorite word is rise, she says it funny. Rise, like a spell. I chuckled, it is a spell. We sat like that for a long time. Two women. No labels. No roles. Just two people who survived. A week later, I received another letter. This one was forwarded through a legal intermediary, prison mail. Diana. The envelope was thin, the paper lined again, the ink smudged in spots like it had been held too long in someone's palm. Rachel. I watched the documentary, a guard found it online and showed it to me. I almost didn't watch, but I did. You looked happy, not performatively, just free. I didn't recognize that version of you at first. I wish I could say I'm different now, that I'm clean, that I'm healed, but mostly I'm just quieter. I don't lie to myself as much. That feels like progress. You built something beautiful without me, despite me, because of me. I'm not sure which it is, maybe all three. This isn't a plea, I don't want anything. I just wanted to say I saw it, and it's extraordinary. I read it once. Then again. And again. I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, but because there was nothing more I needed to say. We had already said everything, whether in courtrooms, letters, silences, or choices. This, her acknowledgement, wasn't closure. It was the last echo. And echoes fade. In the months that followed, I focused on writing. For the first time, I wasn't writing grants or apologies or strategies. I was writing stories. Essays. Reflections on resilience, betrayal, growth, and what it means to survive someone you loved. A publishing house reached out, asked if I'd consider turning my journey into a book. I hesitated, but only briefly, because I knew now my story wasn't just mine. It belonged to every woman who'd been lied to, every sister who'd been scapegoated, every leader who'd had to rebuild from ashes someone else scattered. The working title: Mother Flame, How We Rose After the Fire. Karina wrote the foreword. Lisette illustrated the chapter headers. The women edited it with me, their red pen marks snaking across the manuscript with notes like "This part's too nice," "Tell the real truth," and "Don't forget how hard it was to get out of bed." We laughed through revisions, cried through final proofs. When it was published, the launch event wasn't at a bookstore or a venue. It was in our garden, under fairy lights, beside the mural. The original, still intact, still standing. That night, as the women took turns reading their favorite passages, a new resident sat on the edge of the garden, arms folded, eyes heavy. She was barely 20. Thin, pale, fresh from some story she hadn't yet told. I walked over and knelt beside her. She said nothing at first, then whispered, "It's hard to believe this place is real." I smiled. "Believe it," I said, "you're here." She looked at the fire pit where Karina was adding wood, her daughter dancing barefoot in the grass nearby. "Do you ever get scared?" she asked. "All the time," I replied. "Even now?" I nodded, "Especially now, but fear doesn't mean you're broken, it means you know how badly you want to keep going." She said nothing more. But she didn't leave. She stayed until the last flame flickered. And when the fire dimmed, I handed her the final cupcake from the table. She took it like a holy thing. That night, I stood alone again under the Phoenix mural. The moonlight soft. The breeze warm. The silence kind. I touched the edge of the wall right near the heart. Faded paint slightly chipped. Still beating. Just like me. A year to the day after Diana's sentencing, I stood in front of a packed auditorium in New York City. The lights were warm, the chairs were full. My name was projected on the screen behind me next to the title of my talk. Rebuilding in Public, Trust After Betrayal. I had almost turned the invitation down. The idea of standing on stage, retelling the story one more time, had started to wear on me. Not because it hurt anymore, but because the wounds had closed, and sometimes when they call you to speak, they want to see the scars. But I wasn't there to perform pain. I was there to tell the truth. The real truth. I began the talk with a memory I hadn't shared before. Not with Karina. Not even in the book. My sister used to braid my hair every night before bed, We shared a room, two twin beds pushed against opposite walls. She'd sit behind me on my mattress and hum some tune she made up as she ran the brush through my hair. One night I asked her why she liked doing it so much. She said, because it makes you sit still long enough to listen. A ripple of quiet laughter passed through the crowd. Then I added, for a long time after she betrayed me, I stopped listening. To others, to myself, to anything that reminded me of softness. I thought shutting it all out would keep me safe. But it turns out healing doesn't come from silence. It comes from listening again and learning to trust the voice that rises after the breaking. From there, I told the story, the full arc, not the sensational version, not the court-ready version, but the human one, the grief, the shame, the quiet reclaiming of a life after everything sacred had been weaponized. I talked about the Ember Project, the growth, the failures, the mural, Karina, the girl on the edge of the garden with the cupcake held like a prayer. I didn't name Diana, not once. Because by then, she wasn't the climax anymore. She was the spark, yes. But we were the fire. After the talk, a young woman approached me with trembling hands. She couldn't have been more than 19. She said, my older sister took everything from me, my savings, my sense of safety. I didn't think I'd ever be okay again. I looked at her and said, you don't have to be okay yet, you just have to keep walking. She nodded and I saw it. That flicker. That first ember. The next morning, I flew back to Sacramento. Karina picked me up at the airport with her daughter, now in little pink glasses, holding a sign that said, welcome home, Mother Flame. I laughed so hard it cried. Karina said, you're a meme now, there's no going back. I said, good. Because there was no going back. And thank God for that. We pulled into the driveway of the Ember Project. The garden was in full bloom. The mural had been touched up again, this time with golden threads painted into the phoenix's wings. They shimmered when the sun hit just right. Inside, a new resident was waiting in the foyer. Shy, tired, clutching a duffel bag. Karina walked over, arms open. I'm Karina, she said. This is Rachel, we've got you. The girl blinked, unsure whether to cry or run. I stepped forward, held out my hand. We're not going to ask you to explain everything right now, I said. You're here, that's enough. She nodded, her shoulders dropped slightly. She followed Karina down the hall. I stood there for a moment listening. Not for applause. Not for recognition. Just for the hum of safety. The whisper of new beginnings. And I heard it. Everywhere. In the hallway light. In the garden breeze. In the footsteps of every woman who chose to stay and rebuild. That night I returned to the mural. Alone. Barefoot. Just like the first time. I sat beneath the phoenix and looked up at the stars. No ghosts. No shadows. Only firelight flickering from the lanterns around the courtyard. And I whispered, not to Diana, not even to myself, but to the place. You didn't win. Because we are still burning. And we are never going out.